John McGee, Breakpoint. That book uh, focuses on the disruptions that higher education was going to face. And that book came out about 10 years ago, and John was way ahead of his time in identifying the economic, the social, the demographic changes that were about to happen. Um, Many people have heard about the demographic changes, and Carleton Professor Nathan Graw has written two books, one called The Agile College and the other Demographics and the Demand for Higher Education. Those talk about what some people call the demographic cliff, that
Right.
in about 3 years, we're going to see a decline in the number of graduating seniors
Right.
from high school. And that's going to make for a lot of challenges. That change in the demographics is not going to be even across the country. The Northeast quadrant of the country is going to be hit harder, mainly because they have more colleges, but also the upper Midwest is going to see a decline, and not only a decline, but a change in the demographic of students. Another book that I would recommend everybody to take a look at is by Arthur Levine, and it's called The Great Upheaval. And this book really makes clear that what higher education is going through is the same thing that a number of industries have gone through recently. Journalism, the music
Right.
industry,
Yeah.
film industry, they've all had these great disruptions and how they've had to change and adapt. So the headwinds in higher education are pretty strong, but we're going to have to start adapting to those headwinds. Yeah.
Right. I'm sure you all didn't expect to have homework after this,
Right.
after tuning into the session, but thank you so much for those recommendations. And we will for sure share them along with some other things after this as well.
I am first and foremost a professor before I'm a provost.
So because of these challenges, what's really being required of colleges and universities today?
That's a really good question. Arthur Levine made it clear in at the end of his book that we can no longer think about college experience as a series of classes, courses that people take. We have to think of it as outcomes. What are the outcomes that students are going to have, and how do we think about that? All of these authors have also made it clear that what we have to think is we have to think differently about what the liberal arts are. I know a number of people have been concerned. We'll talk about some of the decisions that we've been making here at St. Ben's and St. John's. But the liberal arts have always been changing.
Right.
And what was thought of as a liberal arts 500 years ago isn't what was thought of in the United States as liberal arts 150 years ago, and definitely not even at the turn of the 20th century. It wasn't that long ago that sociology, psychology, economics, and even the natural sciences were not considered liberal arts. So it changes over time, and we're seeing yet another change. Another scholar that I'm going to refer to is Georgia Nugent. Georgia Nugent is currently the president at Illinois Wesleyan. Before that, she was president at the College of Wooster and also at Kenyon College, all liberal arts colleges. She's also probably the foremost scholar looking at what the liberal arts education is. And she's made very clear that the liberal arts we have to change the way we think about them. It's more of a fluid level of inquiry than it is a set of disciplines and courses. And so it's a pedagogical approach and a breadth of pedagogy and knowledge that makes a liberal arts education. Additionally, the American colleges associations, looks at high impact practices.
Right.
And we've seen a lot, you may have heard about those. High impact practices are things like internships, study abroad, learning communities, writing intensive curriculum. And we have to look at how these high impact practices are in the curriculum and not just what courses are being taught, but how we use these high impact practices in order to help students apply the knowledge that they have
Right.
to real world situations.
Well, I think in a world where so much information is available at our fingertips,
Right.
what's more important is our ability to understand, make sense of that, and apply that information as
Right.
opposed to just getting the information. It's there so often. It's a very different approach. So I know Georgia Nugent actually was on our campus. We've
Yeah.
really explored some of these
Mhm.
issues about what the liberal arts are at both of the liberal arts illuminated conferences that were held on our campuses in the last 5, 6, 7. I don't know. Time
Yeah.
is relative, and post
Mhm.
post the beginning of the pandemic. But I know Georgia was on our campuses
Yeah.
and explored this with our faculty and staff and with colleagues from across the country.
Yes, yes.
So,
yes.
so most of our viewers don't really know much about the integrations curriculum. I know that our general education curriculum is not a topic at every dinner table, but it should be and could be. And so, can you give us a brief description of the integrations curriculum?
Yeah. Traditionally, people have thought of the liberal arts as a distribution model of education. That is, students take a science class, they take a social science class, they take an art class, they take a humanities class, and that counted
Kind of check each of those boxes.
counted as a liberal arts education. So there were a lot of dots around the curriculum, and students went around collecting all these dots. But what they didn't do was intentionally integrate what that meant. What does it mean? So we have a new general education curriculum called the integrations curriculum. And it's not about collecting dots, it's about connecting dots. And so we started that process not by asking what courses students should take, but asking what is it that makes a St. Ben's and St. John's graduate an educated person? And what are the skills? What are the knowledge? What are the values that they need? What are the experiences that we expect them to have to be able to move forward in society? And we embedded these high impact practices that I was just talking about a minute ago, so that we've always had these high impact practices, but it was kind of hit and miss as to whether
not every student was deeply
that's
engaging
right.
or even knew that it was
right.
available to them.
That's right. But now we're embedding it in the curriculum.
Mhm.
And so one of the things is a portfolio, so that students will reflect in their senior year on their 4 years of education. So we have a capstone that's not in a major, but a capstone that is in the general education requirement, so that students will be looking at what is the common good and how do we get at that from all of the different courses and experiences that I have had in these 4 years, and reflecting on that. And I think that this is a very important thing. We also are having students reflect on cultural difference, and those courses are now embedded at a lower level and an advanced level, so that students will be looking at cultural difference in America and then globally, and how that impacts them. We've also scaffolded so that we look at basic knowledge and then expect there to be a building, an intentional building on that in the next level of courses. With the distribution model, however, you just take courses and the scaffolding might happen or might not happen. And this way, we are much more intentional about how that happens.
And we do hear from employers so often about sort of what they're really looking for from right out of college folks is the ability to be able to articulate what it is they've learned and how they can sort of make sense make
Right.
about things, as opposed to that sort of is really, really key, as opposed to having the expectation that they
Mhm.
have sort of practical skills for that job, that singular job, the ability to learn and understand, consume information, and then actually do something with it. So it's also what the expectation is of our graduates from our
Yes.
employers as well.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that because, what employers were looking for and what graduate schools were looking for, those were also things that we took into consideration in building
Okay.
curriculum. Now, I also made the bold statement as provost. Provosts get to make bold statements, right? So I made a bold statement
I'm gonna get
that,
myself one of those jobs.
right, when we were putting this curriculum together, that I wanted this to be the last major general education curriculum reform that we ever did. Not because we're going to get it right, but because we're going to do it ongoing. Now, some people may look at our curriculum and say, holy cow, they keep fixing it, they keep changing it every year. You should be excited as alums that we're doing that because it means we're responsive and we're rethinking as we go, making sure that we make it contemporary and we make it relevant.
And that's not necessarily something that higher ed is known for, is that kind of that nimbleness and that adaptiveness. And we've had, like I said, we've had Brian here twice, and that's something he said repeatedly, that's
Right.
really an expectation of us
Yes,
in this moment.
yes. And that's one of the other things that these great disruptions are going to require
Right.
is a nimbleness and making changes more rapidly. And that's something that higher education has not been accustomed to. They have not been accustomed to how we have to change more rapidly and the acceleration, right?
So there are some things, I imagine, there are some things though that are, that where we want to be sort of grounded in who we are and who we've been.
Mhm.
So what are some things, maybe some features in this curriculum that will
Mhm.
feel really familiar in ways that are
Mhm.
intended to be sort of
Mhm.
at least very mission specific or very eternal
Right.
for us?
Right. Well, I mentioned a minute ago about the pedagogy and how that needs to be there. I think pedagogy is how we approach the education, how we approach the subject matters, what we're trying to do. Now, one thing that I think everybody is going to recognize as alum here is there's still going to be the close personal relationship intellectually between the faculty members and the
Right.
students. We're expecting students and faculty members to be working on research together. We expect students to be doing some deep thinking and faculty to be working with them. We expect faculty and staff to be mentoring our students. I think that's something that everybody expects. That's still here. Changes, uses of technology. We're using more technology in the classroom. Last week we had a blizzard, and we didn't have a snow day. We had a technology day, so classes went online for the day. Now we're not going to online education. We still believe that there's a place for residential liberal arts colleges, and I believe that that is the
Absolutely.
case. But because we have learned through COVID about how to use that technology, that's different. There's changes and there's stability at the same time, right?
Right, absolutely. So let's switch gears just a little bit. So how has the move to strong integration positioned St. Ben's and St. John's to be able to respond so far?
Great question. Strong integration is what's going to help us through this process and through the challenges that we have. Having a unified approach to these problems is essential. As the provost, part of what my job had been was trying to make sure I could bring two schools along in the same direction. Now, having a single president, we have a unified direction, and we're going to be able to move together in a unified way. That also is going to benefit the student experience. One of the things that strong integration has now done is rethink the student experience, not as inside the classroom and outside the classroom, but how is that student experience unified together? And so both student development areas and academic affairs all now come together under the provost. This is a transformative moment for St. Ben and St. John's, because we can now talk about the holistic development of men and women. You know, for decades, we have said we believe in the holistic education of our students,
Right.
but we've really not had a systematic way of doing that. And what we've done is assume that it kind of happens, much like I said about collecting the dots versus connecting the dots. And so now we can think more clearly about that. And you know, one of the ways we can think about that is a common set of institutional learning goals.
Absolutely. So why don't you remind us a little bit about these institutional learning goals?
Yeah. A few years ago, we decided we needed to be more clear about what the learning goals were. What we had around the institution, academic affairs had a set of learning goals. Each student development had a set of learning goals.
Okay.
And so, and they weren't really speaking to each other, right?
They might, if they were similar, it was like coincidence. as
Correct.
opposed to intention.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we hear a lot at St. Ben and St. John's that there is this secret sauce.
Mhm.
Well, what we wanted to do is say, what are the ingredients in this secret sauce? Let's stop talking about the secret sauce. Let's figure out what the ingredients are. And so we had meetings with alums and donors and employers and students and faculty and staff. And through a year-long process, really, came up with what these would be, and the Board of Trustees endorsed them for both institutions. So we expect our students and our alums and everybody associated here to be able to think deeply,
Mhm.
to engage globally, to embrace difference, that's the third, to live courageously, and to serve graciously. And I think that if you look at our alums, that's what makes them special members of their community. And that's what makes our students special too. Now, we're taking this to a new level. In the past, we've thought about students graduating with distinction as having high grades and an outstanding project in their major.
Okay.
Now we're thinking in terms of the institutional learning goals. And I mentioned a minute ago that we have a portfolio. So students will identify one of these 5 to focus on that they want to show that they have distinction in.
Mhm.
But they have to show leadership in and outside of the classroom to be able to do that. So having student development and academic affairs all together with the provost, we can be much more intentional about the experiences that students can be offered to be able to do that and to demonstrate that they can succeed in one of these areas, but not just succeed, that they can show leadership in these areas.
And if we are, and we do say, and we say that with confidence, that
Mhm.
this residential experience, that this communal approach to education matters. It's
Mhm.
something that we take from our monastic
Mhm.
founders. It's
Right.
something we learn. Then to actually have our graduation with distinction be about that deep engagement,
Mhm.
that active demonstration of more than just, high achievement in a classroom, I
Mhm.
think says a lot.
Mhm.
We are,
Yeah.
it is about outcome, as you said earlier,
Mhm. Yes.
really specifically.
Yes. yes. And we still do want high achievement.
Of course,
freshmen.
we want them and we have them.
Yes, yes, but it's that
And
it's that
to
and.
truly be graduating with
Yes,
distinction.
Yes, yes.
That's great. So for those who are avid readers of the magazine, I know we talked about those institutional learning goals when they were first
Mhm.
approved. So in our October 2018 issue, we talked about those too. And really it being about, I think the
Mhm.
articles was like a pledge to prepare. It really is our promise to our students. And I think there were some examples too of how our alums can live out these in their own as well. So
Yes.
definitely take a look back in your archives for that magazine.
Mhm.
So so one of the really exciting things that St. Ben's and St. John's are doing is taking a holistic look at learning. So you can talk a little bit more about what that looks like. I know there's been some work, you've had some outside
Mhm.
help there too. So how are we engaging in that exploration?
Good question. For those of you watching online who may not have been back to the campus recently, I want to invite you back. And if you want to see a physical example, a physical metaphor, if you will, of what I think of this holistic approach, walk into either of the two libraries at St. Ben's, St. John's. The library director, Kathy Parker, and
Who's retiring?
who's retiring this year, yes. But fantastic visionary for our libraries. She and I worked together to reimagine the libraries, to no longer think of the library as a depository of books, as a place for magazines, or a place to go and study. We started thinking about it, and she was very instrumental in thinking about it this way, as a gathering place for scholars, right? A gathering place for people. And when you go in there, you're going to see that it's really a beehive of activity. Because at St. Ben's, the internship office, the career service office, the
Study abroad.
study abroad office, the undergraduate research office, those are all together now in what's called the hub, and that and the Fleischacker Center. Those are all together there. St. John's, we have the writing center there. We have technology
Study,
center
the
at both.
new-
Right, the study
Yep.
is there for different skill levels the students have and what kind of help they might need. So that the students are coming in. And of course, there's also some place to get some coffee, right? So
Very,
the
very
stu-
important.
Right. They have become gathering hubs
Mhm.
at the institution. That's what I think of as this holistic approach, right? That we don't separate out these different areas. Now, granted, we're going to separate the areas out as we're assessing them and as
Mhm.
we're looking and we're thinking what works and what doesn't. But it also helps for us to have a high level of student engagement. And one thing we know, the higher level we have of student engagement, the more student satisfaction we have, the better their outcomes are, and the higher our retention rates are and graduation
And that's the
rates.
point.
Mhm.
Right,
That's
absolutely.
exactly the point.
Okay, so Richard, many of our viewers have received communication about some of the decisions made by the boards of trustees at last week's meeting. Can you tell us about academic program prioritization? What is it and why did we do it?
This is something that is happening all across the nation. And it's part of the reimagining. So first, let's talk about why you do this. You mentioned strong integration. A lot of times people think of change as first we think in terms of what is strategy, and then we think about the operation, and then we think about, okay, now that we fix those, now how do we pivot? But this is standing that on its head. And we pivot first, and then we strategize and operationalize. And the pivot is important because higher education is moving at such a rapid pace of change. You have to make the pivot in that kind of a climate and situation first. So we're making the pivot to say, what are the programs that we need to prioritize, and what are the programs that we need to think about shifting? And that's a very difficult process and a very difficult set of decisions that have to be made. We took this very seriously because we have seen a decline in enrollments. And we also need to think about what are the market forces in higher education that we need to be attuned to, but at the same time, remaining true to our mission. So we're not just going to offer anything that students want to major in. We're going to offer things that are consistent with who we are. I also was talking about Georgia Nugent and the disruptions in the liberal arts. We need to reimagine the liberal arts, not as a set of majors, but as the coursework and the experiences the students are having overall. So 2 years ago, I announced that we needed to reimagine the programs that we have to make them more sustainable and more flexible for the future. We put together a committee of data as well as a steering committee to make recommendations to me. And then I took their recommendations and I made recommendations to the faculty. And the faculty committees looked at it, made recommendations to the faculty who voted. And then those recommendations went to the president and then ultimately to the board. I do want everyone to know that the vast majority, 2/3 of the recommendations that I made were in fact supported by majority votes of the faculty. So this was not something that was done without shared governance process. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not difficult and for some people painful. And I understand for alums, especially some of you watching here, you might be thinking, this is very personal to me because that was my major. And I understand that feeling and I understand those concerns. That does not in any way say that your experience was inauthentic or a bad experience. At the same time, we can't say that your experience 25 years ago or more should be the same experience for students now. And so it was a difficult process, and we came to some conclusions to make some changes. So I'm guessing you want more specific.
Sure, I do. So tell us a little bit about, it was a very data-driven process. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe some of the data points too that were used to evaluate programs.
One of the key points was to have the committee that I set up figure out what the criteria would be in looking. And they had 8 points that eight major criteria that they were looking at. Everything from mission to adaptability to student outcomes, student internal demand, external demand, adaptability of the program, cost of the program. There were lots of different metrics. Then we operationalized those criteria so that we could start collecting some data. And there was an iterative process, a back and forth with academic departments and faculty. We also put together data points, but we double checked those data points with the registrar, with external sources, with the business office and others. So we uh, we're looking at a lot of those data points in figuring that out. Then the committee did a cluster analysis and clustered departments based on each of those criteria, but then all of them in a very complicated analysis. And ultimately, the committee recommended, and then I had to make some decisions about some low enrolled programs. Now, some of those low enrolled programs, we might not have a major or minor, but that doesn't mean we're not going to have courses. We will have courses in many of those programs, and they will continue. And faculty in those programs will also be continuing in the general education requirement. I think that that is a way for our students more broadly to be to be able to be exposed to those areas and those ideas. Whereas in some programs, having the major was requiring us to offer courses that were extremely under-enrolled, and in departments that had high demand, they didn't have the resources to keep doing those. Unfortunately, the announcement that came, this is the first process of this whole process. And the first process, unfortunately, is some elimination so that there can be reprioritizing of those resources. And we already have been doing that in shifting some of those resources to areas where students' demand and student interest is much higher.
Tell us a little bit more about some of those new programs or maybe centers that are on the horizon or opportunities.
Well, one example of the newest major that we just developed is exercise and health science. That program was approved by the board 4 years ago. So that program went from 0 majors to 193 majors now. And it has one tenured faculty member. So that is a good example of the prioritization that we need to do. Now that program has students taking lots of courses in things like mathematics and sciences, and students in that program are interested in going to medical school, to graduate programs in physical therapy and occupational therapy and such. So, and these are traditional areas that our students have gone in the past. It just gives them a new avenue. Another program, a minor that we started a couple of years ago, is data analytics.
Right.
Data analytics has over 130 students in it right now. That is a multidisciplinary program that includes things like mathematics and economics and accounting, as well as some courses in the humanities that are helping students think about large data processes, but also to think about those data processes in an ethical framework.
Right. I mean, the data, these numbers are not without without context.
Yes.
I mean, we've learned so much. We really are talking about equity. We've learned so much that, an algorithm is it in itself the bias of the builder of that algorithm, or the lack of noticing of their own bias can have real implications. And so it's been the ability to analyze, but also to create a more just system in that work.
Yes. We also have we have a new program in the humanities called Narrative Practice.
Right.
Narrative Practice.
Which I just love.
Yes. This is an innovative program where students learn about narrative and writing of narratives and the telling of narratives. Let me give you an example of how this program is really transformative for our students. One of the areas that they can study, and a number of students interested in health can take classes that look at health narratives. Some of our students, through service learning, will be working with healthcare providers, and they may be assigned a terminally ill patient. And they work with that terminally ill patient to help that patient write narratives about their condition. And the healthcare providers have found that as patients journal and narrate their experiences, that they can better help the patients, because it's better than just showing up for an office visit for 10 minutes and saying, well, I got this, and it happens this way.
Is it a 1 or a 10
Right.
on a scale to be more
That's-
specific
that-
about it? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Now we can, they can help. We've had students who do this program who go on to medical school and other professional programs in healthcare,
Mhm.
as well as even in nursing. And this has become an important factor in some students getting in to medical school or to
Even these
physical therapy.
pre-professional ideas,
Right.
and that's always been something that's really been distinctive about our nursing program too,
Right.
is that really that it is a liberal arts Benedictine approach
Right.
to a pre-professional or professional program.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so this is one of those examples. And I'm glad you mentioned nursing, because I always want to remind everyone, we do not train nurses. We educate healthcare leaders. And that's exactly what we're doing in the nursing program here. And I think that we can see that.
Absolutely.
A new program we just started this year is climate studies. Nothing more, I think, important.
Especially for
to
this
the-
generation who
for-
who are so
that's-
deeply impacted by
that's exactly
decisions
right.
of those
That's
who came
exactly
before
right.
them. Absolutely.
That's exactly right. We also have going through the faculty process right now, a program in finance. That's a multidisciplinary program that includes economics, mathematics, and accounting. And they're all working together to develop a very robust finance program that I think is going to be very distinctive for us. And we're looking at a wide variety of other programs right now, in a lot of different areas. And I think you're going to see some new programs developing. But one of the things you're going to see, there's a lot of this cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary approaches to the issues that we're looking at.
So tell us a little bit more about what comes next. We have a strategic planning process ahead of us, if rumor has it.
Yeah, Brian probably has talked about that in
Yes.
this very room. Yes, the academic program prioritization is one step toward that process. We now are going to be starting within this month the more public data gathering.
Mhm.
So many folks watching tonight are probably, you're going to have some contact where we're going
Absolutely.
to ask for your input about the direction and the future of our institutions. Now, I've been sharing with you some ideas about the direction of the future, but we also need to put a little meat on those bones. We need to start thinking about what do we become in the future? What are we holding on to? What are we letting go of? And what is going to propel us forward? So I'm working with the new chief operating officer, who has just, Kara has been here just
18 days, she
18
told
days,
me.
okay.
18 days. Kara
Not even
Kollwitz.
3 weeks. Yes, she and I are leading the process, but I don't want to say leading the process. I'm going to say she and I are facilitating the process, facilitating getting input from everyone about the strategic plan. But this is going to be a very different strategic planning process than we've ever done before. This is not going to be your typical 5-year plan. This is going to be a more rolling plan where we work on 2 to 3 year projects on a rolling basis. And we're going to start by funding some of these initiatives really quickly and to see where they go. And so I think we need, this is going to be a new way of doing strategic planning, but it's also part of the pivot that I've been talking about, how we make the changes rapidly. Look, five years ago, no one would have said we're going to have a pandemic. We're going to have more online classes because everybody's going to have to do that. And there's going to be this great disruption. I mean, we had vague ideas about the disruption, but this has changed very rapidly. So 5 year plans are going to be obsolete within 1 or 2 years of them going.
It's like thinking the phone I have in my pocket is actually going to serve me in 5 years.
That's exactly right. And you know, the other thing about the pandemic, I'm one of those who believe in higher education, the pandemic changed nothing. It just accelerated everything. The changes that we're seeing in higher education were going to happen over the next decade. It's just that they happened very quickly because the pandemic came and was a complete disruptor of not only society, but was a disruptor of higher education.
So how can people who care deeply about St. Ben's and St. John's be assured that that the changes we're making are student-centered ones?
You need to know that when the boards restructured, they changed their committee structure. And used to, for example, they had a academic affairs committee, they had a St. John's student development committee, and they had a St. Ben's student development committee. And then they had different finance committees and so forth. Now we have one committee that is called the student experience. And all of these areas have to meet together and do it in a strategic way to think about the student experience. When we were doing program prioritization, I made it clear that the number one thing was what is best for students. Not what is best for a program, not what is best for those of us who are in administration or the faculty, but what is best for student outcomes and student education, to be an educated Benny and a Johnny who can think deeply, who can engage globally, who can embrace difference, live courageously, and serve graciously. What is it at the core? And this strategic plan is about where are we going to be with our students in the next decade? How are we going to move forward? And President Brees has been very clear. He uses this term that I think is fantastic. It is time for us to lift our gaze. And that's what I'm taking as a directive from him. It's time for us to no longer look internally, but we have to lift our gaze, to look out, to look to the future, and to think, what are our students going to become because of the education we provide?
So we are excited to have you help us do that. And so right now, I'm hoping that we can hear from our audience. And do we have any questions from those listening and watching?
We do. I have a question from Christine. She's asking, for programs that will not continue, such as peace studies, which will programs remain robust enough for students to fulfill their major requirements in a satisfactory manner? For instance, we worry that faculty may leave to pursue other opportunities, which may reduce the probability of students having a rich experience in their major.
Okay, so this is about students who are currently in the major.
In the major,
Right.
Yep, trying to finish it up.
Yes, and I have already, the first thing I did Monday morning was meet with our accreditor online to talk about what our teach out of these programs would be. And Monday, I began the process of meeting with every single department and program that is going to be losing a major. In fact, I want to back up for a second and say, when the report came out last summer, I met with every single department and faculty member who was affected by this. And I met with them multiple times over the fall semester. So I have tried to do this in the most Benedictine way as I can to talk about what are the ways we can change. I am meeting with them to make sure that we're going to be able to offer the major to the students who are currently here and have the experience that we are expecting. And I'm working with the deans to make sure that that's going to happen. And we call that the teach out of the program. We are committed to that. It's going to happen. I want to say those programs that are losing their majors, most of the faculty are going to remain. And I have talked to them personally to make sure that they are still committed to St. Vincent St. John's, to doing the work, and they are, because they first and foremost are dedicated to our students.
Thanks. Other question, Ann?
Yes. So a little bit more on peace studies from Christine. She said the area study, discontinuing it, she wanted to kind of get more information. She said this area study seems to reflect Benedictine values and be a focus of the honors program. Mm-hmm. Will these types of classes be integrated into other areas of study?
I'm going to be talking with the Peace Studies program about that very, very topic, and how do we integrate those perspectives into the general education requirement as well as into the honors program. So yes, in fact, Christine, we're going to be working exactly on that. So thank you very much for that question.
And I know we do have, I mean, I know that some of the Peace Studies faculty are very frequently, on study abroad programs too. So there's already a habit within some of that faculty of being sort of integrated in other disciplines already.
Right.
And we'll continue to do that.
Right. That is correct. And just to remind everybody there, this is my 34th year at St. Vincent St. John's. I've been here 33 years. I know all of the faculty in all of these programs. Well, in fact, I know all the faculty in all the programs, basically. But this is not some abstract number or idea to me. These are people. These are people who are committed to our students. Our students are people also who are making changes in the world. And I want to make sure that we give the students the education and the broad perspectives that they need to have to be educated and productive members of society, but also to leverage the talents of our faculty. Even if there's not a major in that program, how do we integrate that knowledge across the institution?
Okay. And there's a tied honors program and Pathways to Distinction, isn't there?
Yes.
The program.
Yes, there is an honors program, and that would be something for another topic.
Yeah.
Here.
More to come for sure.
More to come.
I know in the next, both St. John's Magazine and St. Ben's Magazine, which will follow a little bit, there will be more detail on some of these areas. I wouldn't say they're not treatises or white papers on any of these, but it'll give you a little bit more information on many of these programs and innovations as well.
Great. We have another question from an alumna from the class of 2018. Will students be able to create individualized majors for any of the programs getting removed?
Yes, we still have an individualized major, and some students do take that option. Mm-hmm. That has always been an option at St. Vincent St. John's, and we will continue with that option. They would work with a faculty member to develop that major, and we would be open to students doing that. So thank you very much for that question.
Beth wants to know, where can we find more information about the comprehensive review that led to the academic program changes?
I could post some information, links to that information after we post this video. Mm-hmm.
Great.
More to come. We'll make sure
More
you
to
get
come.
access to that as well.
Mhm.
I will say most of that information has been very much available internally to the entire community,
Mhm.
but obviously has not been
Mhm.
public, but we can definitely share some more
Yes,
information.
yes.
We have a question from Robert from the St. John's class of 71. Will attending college, especially the liberal arts, for the joy of learning, ever be enough in the current era and in the future?
I hope so. I hope so. But we also we have to think about one, the joy of learning. That's why I'm in this business. I love learning. I love ideas. I love talking ideas and reading about new ideas. I do believe a lot of our students have that still. At the same time, they also have aspirations and career goals. And their parents want to see, and I hate to use this term, but a return on the investment, and that is what is the value of the education that we provide? Now, we provide, I think, a very strong education. And you saw in the president's announcement, a reminder that we rank number 1 and number 2 in job placement. And we do that not because of the technical skills that we're giving our students, but because of the broad education, their ability to think, their ability to write, their ability to communicate, and their ability to think ethically and act courageously. So I think that we will have that. I think we still have that on this campus. I invite you to come and visit the campus, to talk to our students. You will see an engaged student body who are concerned about the global issues that confront us today, and they want to make a difference. And they are talking about these ideas, and they're doing it in very constructive ways. So I don't think it's ever left us. I think that because they may not be choosing a major that some of us traditionally think of in those ways, doesn't mean that they're still not doing that.
Looks like we have time for one more question. This is from Michael from 1971.
Oh, the class of 71 is
Yes,
well
they're
represented.
representing well today. I'm told that our CSB SJU students of today no longer look at themselves as attending 2 different single-sex institutions. If that is accurate, what does this new way of thinking on our campuses help our ability to recruit prospective students not interested in attending a single-sex institution?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think that is more the case than in 1971. I think they were much more separate then. We have had a common educational experience for now decades, and students see that common education experience. We also do have some separate areas. For example, women's leadership, which I think is very important for our students, as well as a men's center, which I think is very important for them to think about what does it mean to be a male in this society. But I also want to say that things are different in the way students think about gender in 2023 than it was in 1971 or 1951 or any other point in between. And I think that this is an advantage for us because they can see us as a co-educational education system, right? While at the same time having some separateness. And I think that that's a key thing because the number of students who are looking purely for an all men's college or an all women's college is in fact small and getting smaller and smaller.
In a cohort of students
In a
that's
cohort
getting
of
smaller
students,
too.
yes.
So I will say there'll be much more to come on that as well, as we've done some really good research. And many of you alums received a survey about sort of who we are and how we articulate that. And we're continuing to work on how we share this story. I mean, one of the worst things for us to be is the best kept secret. We want students to understand that this is a place where they can explore these topics and learn more about themselves.
Can I just,
Sure.
I just want to end my point here. I'm taking over the interview. Sorry.
It's okay.
This is going to be a golden age for St. Ben's St. John's. I truly believe it. There is always some friction at change. There's always some anxiety when we're making a pivot. But we are doing this to position ourselves better in the marketplace, but better for our students and for our future. And I think that this is going to be a moment that we will look back and say, that was the time that they made some hard decisions in order for us to become the premier institution that I think we're going to become.
Well, that's a great note to end on. And thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
today. And thank you to all of you for your questions. If you have any more, please feel free to share them. We'll get back to you as well. So we'll be back next month with another exciting episode. Please stay tuned for final comments from Anne.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks, Richard, for your time this evening. Audience, you can share additional questions or comments on tonight's episode through the evaluation form that will be emailed to you from the Alumni Relations Office. This concludes our episode of St. Ben's at Home. We'll be back in April with the director of the Center for Global Education, Dr. Kevin Clancy, who will talk with us about global learning opportunities on campus and abroad and how to deliver a premier global education experience, covering everything from CSB and SJU's beloved study abroad programs to understanding the breadth and depth of the internationalization on campus. That's coming up on Thursday, April 27th. Don't miss it. You can find additional details about the St. Ben's at Home series on the landing page listed here. We will also share this link in the evaluation email you will receive soon. Thank you all for attending and have a great night.